Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel held their end of season press conference, and we've officially entered the sit and stew phase of the offseason as the Dolphins face arguably avoidable issues while the rest of the league's playoff teams are focused on chasing the Lombardi trophy. Josh, before we get too deep here, who you got winning the Super Bowl?
Oh man, you put me on the spot with that one. I guess I'll go Eagles. I just going Eagles. I don't think they're actually going to win, but I'm putting on the spot here. What about you, Jake? You got a team?
Nah, man, I'm right there with you. I like the Eagles. I really like the defense. I think Vic Fangio has done a lot of good things, and I think he's one of the people who might be owed a little bit of an apology where he might have been in the right telling people to kick rocks. But Josh, I call this the sit and stew period because I think one of the most interesting points when Mike McDaniel met with the media is that he said that when everybody works together, they could have won some games. There were a lot of avoidables, a lot of things they could have done differently to win games instead of finishing the year at 8-9. That's why I call this the sit and stew period, because rosters are pretty much locked. We have Anthony Weaver taking interviews with the Chicago Bears, the New Orleans Saints. Danny Crossman, still your special teams coordinator. You have Tyreek Hill not wanting to be traded. Who knows? You have all this drama going around, and there's nothing you can do about it while you have these top teams fighting for a Lombardi trophy. So it's a little bit of an annoying time for a fan, but something we're pretty used to after all this time.
Yeah, I love that you call it the sit and stew period because there's nothing we can do, right? You just got to sit there and just wait patiently and just, kind of sit with that bad taste in your mouth. And, the Dolphin players, the fan, the coaches, they have absolutely a bad taste in their mouth. So let them sit and stew on a little bit, but let's hope that they learn from their mistakes because all it seems like over the last few years, it's just the same endless cycle, same mistakes, same old Dolphins.
So Tyreek Hill didn't ask for a trade. This seems like it's a situation that's going to continue to be murky, well, until it's not. So to take it back a little bit, Tyreek Hill did say, for me, I got to do what's best for me and my family. If that is here or wherever the case may be, I'm going to open that door for me. I'm going to open that door. I'm out. It was great playing here, but I got to do what is best for my career. Josh, it was funny to kind of hear that conversation devolve where he was like trying to be PR and professional, and then it just went worse and worse. Then it was about his family, and then it was all about him. And I think that's my biggest gripe that we've seen so far. It's me, it's all these different things. And then to just mix it in here, Josh, before I hear your thoughts, we have Drew Rosenhaus's agent coming out and saying he's committed to the Dolphins, which I take that as AKA he has a contract with the Dolphins. But also, Rosenhaus did not say if he does or does not want to play for the Dolphins. So how do you react to all this?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, man. When you're first hearing Tyreek speak, you can just kind of see his head going that way, and it's just like, okay, I'm going to open the door and see what's best. And he's just like, you know what, I'm out. I'm done. It's been nice here, good riddance. And then yesterday, Rosenhaus, I think he came on the Pat McAfee show, and he was trying to, I don't want to say dissolve the issue, but try to temper it a little bit. And he came out and he made it sound all promising, right? You saw the Ian Rappaport tweets, you saw some of the other tweets. He's committed to the Dolphins. And then right after that, they ask him, so he'll be back. And Drew Rosenhaus like, actually, I still haven't talked to him. This, that, and the other thing. So I don't know that Tyreek Hill truly knows what he wants to do. I don't know that Drew Rosenhaus is in any, the right mindset to be speaking on the subject. But let's be honest, man. It sounds like Tyreek Hill wants out. Drew Rosenhaus, if he could have diffused the fire, right? He could have put that thing away and said, yes, he wants to be with the Dolphins. He's upset, but he understands the mistakes he made and he wants to move on from it. But that's not what happened here. So they're still leaving the door open. I think Mike Garafolo then came out and said that, a lot of teams would be interested if Tyreek Hill's on the block. So we can sit here and speculate what the Dolphins could fetch in return for that. But a lot of words to say. I had to laugh when Drew Rosenhaus went out there to try to dissolve the situation, and he just kind of threw some more gas on the fire.
It's just so bad, man, because it's an agent, and you have Pat McAfee calling him a super agent. It's just such like you're not going to learn anything of substance in an interview like that. That's why it was just kind of annoying to me. I did think that was great that you have this staged interview. You have Drew Rosenhaus planning to go on Pat McAfee, and what he's going to talk about. And the fact that you have a multi-million-dollar super agent who looked like he was playing DDR the way he crossed up his feet here, going in a couple different directions, that actually was a little surprising to me. And it kind of just, I think, speaks to Tyreek Hill himself, right? You have no idea what's going on with him. And Josh, for the talent, there is a big conversation to be had here about what's going to stop this from happening again, right? Like, I think Schefter was putting out the London games today. Like, the Jets are going to be playing in London. The Jags are playing in London. And I'm just wondering, man, like, the Dolphins weren't any better with or without Tyreek Hill. They did not win a playoff game. if this isn't a team that's 5-0 in the second week of October, what's to stop this from happening again? Like, the Dolphins were up 3 games with 5 to play in the division. Can we really trust that if Tyreek Hill was to return next season, that we could say, like, all right, like, yeah, man, Tyreek Hill's really going to be cool, calm, and collected and be that leader this team needs? No, there's 0% chance.
Yeah, there's no chance that happens. And I do think the one thing that I don't know that either of us touched on, but he did have a wrist injury that I think that Rosenhaus mentioned he suffered back in the Commanders joint practices. So he has been hampered by that, but he fought through that. He knew what was coming with the territory. And to your point, Jake, this offense kind of turned into that Cinderella pumpkin at midnight. And we kind of see that at some point you're going to have to evolve out of the Tyreek Hill big plays. And you're going to have to, try to be more of a traditional offense potentially. So at some point we're going to have to steer away from the whole Tyreek Hill thing. So I think this might have been a blessing in disguise, having to, almost forcefully having to evolve that offense instead of bringing him back. McDaniel was even asked, is he going to be the wide receiver 1 next year? He's like, if he's doubled, no, but just all coach speak. So I don't know, man.
What'd you think of this McDaniel quote? And something Josh and I was talking about doing was maybe cutting some audio from these interviews and using them in the clip. And man, it's so scary trying to read a Mike McDaniel quote because you sound so dumb because he's just having a normal sentence and then it just goes down this path and you're like, have these 2 different quotes here? But McDaniel did say, I can find people until they're blue in the face. I can take their money. I can yell at them, but until they understand that part of the reason that we're in the position is controllable and we have to, without absolute certainty and 0 tolerance for anything else, we have to clean the controllables up and we have a chance to be successful together. Josh, to me, that sounds like someone was putting up a super big stink when Tua was out of the lineup and wasn't getting 10 targets a game. That's what that sounds like to me. And also, I wanted to get your thoughts. Any of that yelling, those tense locker room moments, Odell Beckham Jr. maybe?
Yeah, I mean, we could sit here and that was another thought I had immediately because I'm trying to say he does say players. I don't know if that's his way of protecting just Tyreek Hill and instead singling him out, right? We all know Tyreek Hill has to be one of those guys, but my mind eventually at first I went to Jalen Ramsey. I'm like, I don't think Ramsey's that kind of guy, and then I said, oh shit, Odell Beckham Jr. probably may have been that culprit. So there might be some other players too, but this was the thing that I think truly. I was kind of in limbo with Mike McDaniel. I could understand bringing him back, and I still understand bringing him back, right? You understand Stephen Ross's thought process with that. But hearing this, man, hearing that you could not even find some of these players money to get them to, listen, to buy in, to show up on time, to do those things, that is extremely alarming to me and makes you wonder if he can, break out of that buddy type mentality or coach that it seems to, that cloud that seems to be lingering over his head. One thing I will say, though, is do you think Mike McDaniel now, he's being forced, you have to get control of this locker room. This is kind of your last chance. Sometimes these coaches get fired. They go in and we see that second chance other places. Do you feel like maybe Mike McDaniel's going to be looking in the mirror like, all right, man, you're on some borrowed time. We know the quarterback situation. We know we got to find a new guy there. In case he goes down, I need to get this team buying in because this is my one last chance truly to get the Dolphins over that hump. We're sick of setting that time to 25 after the hour. We're not going to 26 after the hour. Get your ass out there and start fighting.
Dude, that's a really good question. Is it something we'd want to happen? Like the whole Mike McDaniel idea was Flores just, verbally beating the crap out of Tua, and Mike McDaniel was this guy who could kind of build him. But now we're in a situation where even we see, pouty, pissy Tua all the time too. So you wonder if that's happening. So there was one of my biggest gripes, man, was whether it was for a quarter or a stretch of games, this team just lacked urgency. And that could be a McDaniel issue where you're just trying to figure things out. Like, all right, we'll put up 21 points against the Baltimore Ravens in the fourth quarter, which it's kind of gross that, we have to, for our highlights, we're going back 3 years. Would you want him? Would you want Mike McDaniel's coaching style to change this year? Would you want this level of urgency to both? Because I kind of look at like Kyle Shanahan, where I think a lot of the time, I think he gives pretty good answers to good questions, but he can get a little sassy at times too and come off as a total jerk. So I could see McDaniel going that path, but would that impact him inside the locker room? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And, maybe it is just removing, I don't want to say the cancer, but, you trade Tyreek Hill. Maybe that was that one factor, that had some of those veterans, maybe being lenient and, not showing up to practice, things like that. And the whole Tua thing, man, you mentioned, there has to be more of a story to that, too, because you see him on the sideline. I think Mike McDaniel or Chris Grier, one of them even mentioned in the presser, he's showing he's a little bit pissy, that he has to be on the sideline that he's out. And, that goes back to, is there any, tension between the staff keeping him out of these games. I still think that, if you're Teron Armstead, you're Tyreek Hill. You heard at the beginning of the year, Tyreek Hill from wrist specialist, you should get surgery. Teron Armstead was supposed to be out week 1. And now you see your quarterback, the guy that you guys are here fighting for, he's missing 5 weeks from a head injury, then later on the hip. So, that probably brings up some of that frustration as well. I'm spiraling out of control because this has all just been stewing in our brains, like you mentioned. But if you ask me if I want Mike McDaniel to change his coaching ways, I do. I want to see him get over that hump. And I mean, I'd much rather be able to sit here and say that Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel are success stories and they're the ones that brought us to the Super Bowl than to be, going through the same damn thing in the next 4 or 5 years. I just feel like we already kind of got that 1 foot out the door, if we're being honest.
SB Nation, Josh, we both wrote for the Finsider. SB Nation's Matt Warren. He actually did a really good job writing up what a Tyreek Hill trade would kind of look at like. And I think a snowball that's really changed things was a little clip came out from the game where you could hear Jalen Waddle saying, "Cheetah, are you done?" Josh, did hearing that where you had, Jalen Waddle sitting there and you could actually see like Malik Washington doesn't move because you just know this is a guy who's getting paid 1 bajillionth of what Tyreek Hill is to do that same type of role, all the different motions and different things like that. So Josh, hearing that, did that change like a final straw on the camel's back or anything like that for you?
Honestly, it kind of did, and I wish I was better with audio because I was going to go in there like the CIA and try to, drown out some of that noise because at the end of it, then you hear someone say, okay, good, then just stay off or don't be here, something like that. And I don't know. I don't think it was Jalen Waddle's voice, but there was definitely a part towards the end of that
for sure.
It could have definitely been Craycraft. And I was going to joke. I was going to tweet it out, but I didn't want to make people mad. Could you imagine if it was like Craycraft that was one of these players that gets fined from not showing me? It's just Craycraft's this dude that has an attitude or whatever. I mean, hilarious. But I mean, hearing that, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And wasn't it with and wasn't it the third quarter? Correct me if I'm wrong. There's still like 7 minutes left, 18-6 game or something like that. I mean, you were still in this game. So I know with the score all day, they were showing the Chiefs and Broncos, and that can be demoralizing after you just, went out there and battled through that wrist injury. But dude, you are that leader in that locker room. You wear that captain's C on your chest. You got to be much better than that tantrum on the field and then what followed post game. So I think we said it before, man. I'm done with Tyreek Hill. Deuces up. I understand that he's an elite talent, that he is going to go off and do great things, maybe even hits that 2,000-yard mark. But the Dolphins, based on all this, I don't know how you can bring him back.
So he has $26.9 million roughly owed to him in guaranteed money next year. Miami could trade him before March and all the roster bonuses and fun things like that and clear roughly $26 million on the salary cap. But Josh, what team would do that? You see what's happening with Tyreek Hill. You understand the same thing, the talent, but you're going to take something back with that contract. So the idea is I kind of look at what happened with Ryan Tannehill. You let some of the bonuses come in, you say we're going to take some of the money, and as a result, the draft pick gets a little better. You look back to the Jalen Ramsey trade, a 3rd-round pick, and Hunter Long, aka if you really wanted two 3rd-round picks. I could see something like this happening, Josh, where the Dolphins are paying, $25 million-ish for Tyreek Hill, and you get a 3rd-round pick back. Currently, according to Warren, there are about 18 teams that have the cap space to acquire Hill. He does turn 31 this offseason and has a $36 million cap hit for 2026. But there are no guarantees there. So there's the rumor, Josh, a 3rd-round pick would do it. Is that pretty much the end of the story in your mind?
I think so. I joked, I think we talked about the Stephon Diggs. He only was with Houston for that 1 season. I didn't realize that either. So that's kind of similar situation. I just don't know that, Tyreek Hill had that same outburst. But yeah, I was okay with a 2nd, conditional 3rd. I'm kind of joking with myself in my head. It's probably gonna be a 4th or something like that. But at this point, man, you just kind of take what you get. And shout out to Warren for breaking that down. Was there any team that really stuck out to you as a team that could use Tyreek Hill? I think I said the Dallas Cowboys. I saw JP Acosta. He kind of joked them, and there's a graphic going around with the Commanders and some other teams. I would love to throw him to the NFC though, because you don't need the cheetah prowling around the AFC trying to, make the Dolphins regret their decision or anything like that.
So the Dolphins draft 13th and a 3rd-round pick. Sure, fine, whatever. The Dolphins, it looks like they're going to have 2 of them. The comp pick for Christian Wilkins is looking like it might be a 4th-round pick. So if you're going to do a trade that involves Tyreek Hill and draft capital, are there different things you can do, Josh? The Dallas Cowboys, they draft 12th. The Dolphins are at 13th. A couple picks up if you really want to get crazy. Chicago Bears, the Saints, the Panthers. We already see Robert Hunt trying to campaign for Tyreek Hill to join the Panthers. I think that'd be kind of cool, man. I don't know how much higher you'd be able to go up, but if you're the Dolphins and you look at next year and you see this level of urgency boiling up with this coaching staff, Chop Robinson was awesome, man. So don't hear what I'm not saying, but you need somebody who can come in and day one starter, offensive line, back seven of the defense. I'm not entirely sure. That's a debate to be had, but you wonder, could Tyreek Hill be a trade from 13 to 8? Is there value there on both sides with the Panthers where you'd be willing to jump up 8 spots and get one of those final premier pieces in the top 10? That'd be something I'd maybe consider instead of just like a third rounder. Try to get a little creative, and not to get on a huge soapbox, but like Chris Grier, you've been here since 2016. Like there needs to be a certain level of creativity, Jesus Christ. But I mean, we saw the Jalen Waddle jump around, and now that is kind of looking a little gross when you see how that is gone. So this needs to be a Chris Grier offseason, and that kind of makes me want to throw up in my mouth.
Yeah, we both should throw up, like, that cat thing. I think I was doing the dry heave the last time. Yeah, I mean, and that goes back to the whole McDaniel thing. Like, you want to see them prove that they've learned from their mistakes and go up there and do things that are going to turn this thing around. I like your thought process. So draft night, maybe a receiver falls. I know McMillan's like an alien, whatever be, or an offensive lineman, because you will eventually need to replace Tyreek Hill if you get rid of him. But I think you need to shore up those
Waddle,
trenches,
man.
like you mentioned.
Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, those gotta be your receivers. I think at least. And John was awesome.
Still want a big body too, but yeah, man, I think you might have the right idea. Rather than getting a conditional third or fourth or whatever, use Tyreek to potentially move up. So we'll see what happens, man. Chris Grier, though, you got to figure out a way, because it's just so funny looking back at that trade and then all the receiver trades that have come after that. And I mean, I know at the time the Dolphins had the draft capital; they were drafting later in the draft. But my God, man, it just looks like they give so much compared to what they're going to eventually get for a guy who almost put 2,000 yards a little bit ago.
And do you have any regrets? Like, do you regret making that trade for Tyreek?
No, but I just do you have, like, I don't know that I'm indifferent, right? Like, the stats were cool, those big plays were awesome, but like the Dolphins are still like they haven't done they still don't want a playoff game, I guess. Like, so I'm not mad about it. Did he help you learn
about Tua? Like I get that, but like I think there's a little bit there where like it kind of got you to see some other things.
Tua wouldn't have been able to do those things without Tyreek Hill. So yeah, man, you're right. It really opened your eyes, and it allowed Tyreek Hill to also show that he's more than just that Mahomes maven. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's just the Dory brain doesn't think that far, Jake.
Let's keep it going. Let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa. The Miami Dolphins have no concerns about. Sorry, the Dolphins have no. I don't even know what that is. The Dolphins.
I had to make sure I didn't write that.
The Dolphins have no concerns about Tua's hip. Expect more out of the franchise quarterback. Josh, this caught me by surprise, where Grier came out and said no concern at all about Tua's hip. We've talked. It is a very unique injury, and there's no concern at all. He's 26 years old, still growth. I think you've seen growth every year. And then he went on to say he needs to be available. He needs to know how to protect himself. And Josh, I mean, you've been here since 2016. You're the GM. Every word you say has power, has meaning, has strength. When Pat Riley says something like this, you see him calling out Jimmy Butler. Like, we all know the issues with Tua and that he needs to stay on the field. What is the positive about mentioning it here, bringing it up here? Is it just that urgency again?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't want to say he was throwing him under the bus, but it was here. And then it was later in the presser where he kind of did the same thing. They were talking about how they were just 1 or 2 plays away from making the postseason and how things might be different if Tua just didn't take that hit. So yeah, I feel like it might be the sense of urgency, but also, maybe the frustration. Maybe they're frustrated from their talks with Tua. We were frustrated, Jake, when he got up and said, "What did you learn from your concussions?" Concussions aren't good, not to get concussions. Like, come on, man. Like, prove that you've learned from your mistakes when you're going out there and diving, knowing that you have a hip injury for first downs. I can understand why Chris Grier is frustrated, maybe throwing him under the bus, and maybe just, lighting a fire under his butt, lighting a fire under this entire regime's butt. And I think that's what we need to do at this point, because at this point they're running it back. We are what we are, and we just got to hope that the entire team can rally behind it. So I thought it was funny seeing Chris Grier kind of go full heel, but he sees that his grasp of being a general manager, at least for the Miami Dolphins, is probably slowly starting to slip away.
Do you think it was a good idea? I get why he did it, and I think we all agree with it. And I think most fans will kind of say, yeah, like this needs to be said. This needs to be directed at Tua, that the best ability is availability. And I got to start putting a nickel in the jar every time I say that, because I do say it too much. But Don't we also know that Tua is one of those guys that every time he gets in front of the media and he has a chance to say something, first he's going to say, and like, don't get me wrong, I'm a Tua fan and I hate that I have to use that disclaimer for everything, but he's the king of, I don't listen to the haters, and then instantly quote what the haters say. Like, is this going to be a situation where Tua comes back and you have it written down here, we get the hefty lefty version of Tua back? Or is it something where he comes out and does a couple interviews and talks about, hey, maybe the training staff held me back. I wanted to go. I wanted to be there and fighting for my guys. And it's actually their fault, and make this a bigger topic than it necessarily had to be for January 10th sit and stew period.
Damn, dude. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of leaning towards that. Some men just want to watch the world burn, sort of, situation with the Dolphins right now, right? So, I mean, and based on the Tua that we've seen, right, the glasses, he just looks miserable at times on the sideline. I could definitely see him coming out and being like, they ask him, what happened last season? Well, the doctors didn't clear me. That's what happened last season. That's why we're not where we wanted to be. This, that, and the other thing. So, based on the new Tua, based on this comments, yeah, man, you're starting to get me. I don't want to say I'm getting excited to think about what could possibly happen, but I'm excited to see how Tua reacts because, again, I was taken back by these comments. We all knew it needed to happen. To come out there and to say it in your end of the season press conference, it almost seemed like he was deflecting it off of him, right? Okay, I couldn't find a backup quarterback. We thought Skylar Thompson was good because he almost won a game in Buffalo where he literally didn't do much of anything. We decided to run it back, but you know what? We'll deflect the blame and put it on the quarterback who we've told time and time again to slide, get down, throw the ball away, etc. So, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more pointing the fingers, and I guess this is what just happens when you have a team in the Dolphins' current situation.
The thing I liked about McDaniel that is knowing about Grier is all the ifs. I think McDaniel does a good job of kind of saying it how it is. Like, hey, is Tyreek going to be your number one next year? McDaniel flat out, well, it depends on if teams are going to double cover him. Like, I think that's a legit answer where Grier's like, well, if this went right, if this, which is all true, it's all factual statements, but those are factual statements for us as fans. And when it's the leader of your entire team, the manager of your organization, that's what his idea, his concepts being shared to Chris or Stephen Ross are as well. I don't like that. I don't like that his excuse to like how he could be back this year is, well, if this went differently, if that went differently. And one of the things, Josh, you did bring it up here. Did you mention this quote here about what Chris Grier said about the QB2 position? Because I thought this was a really interesting that he says we were runner-ups for a lot of these guys here and we wanted a new quarterback too. But there were some financial restrictions and comp pick stuff, which they've already beefed the comp pick stuff. And that'll be another conversation for another of those. And then he goes on to say, it's a position we do not take lightly. That's a position we will always focus on. And Josh, it just kind of sounded like a lot of BS, contradicting himself, talking about how it's something we're always going to invest in, always focus on, and then move forward with Skylar Thompson. And then even what is Mike White? I mean, it's just like the proof in the pudding, man.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think it's kind of him deflecting it. And this is probably all stuff he probably said to Stephen Ross, right, in his end of the presser, the pointing of the finger to Tua getting hurt. And, okay, well, these backup quarterbacks, I didn't pay this guy X, Y, and Z because I was worried it would affect the compensatory picks or whatever. I mean, he just needs to take responsibility. I did like at the very end where he said, I will tell you that every stone will be unturned at the position, including the draft this offseason. So I think the Dolphins, hopefully, they may have finally learned from their mistakes. I kind of want to rack through the free agents last year and get your thoughts, Jake. Do any of these names stand out to you as who maybe the Dolphins were in on? Jimmy G, that was the first name that really, okay, he has familiarity. That's probably the guy they were interested in. But then there was also Darnold, Josh Dobbs, Marcus Mariota, Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, just to name a few. So he named, I think it was, top flight backups or something like that. He made it sound like these guys were that next tier backup. So do any of those names really pop out at you that maybe could have been the guy the Dolphins had their eye on? And then honestly, any of those names other than Darnold really stand out as someone that would have changed this season? I really don't know that any of those guys would have done more than Snoop Huntley or Skylar Thompson. And that just goes to the bigger issue the Dolphins have, that they need to find a fringe quarterback one to take over when Tua gets hurt.
Would Joe Flacco survive behind our offensive line? Like, he gets it out so quick, and I remember those games against the Jets a couple of years ago when he was the backup there. Like, he wasn't getting sacked at all for how bad that offensive line was. That's someone who kind of sticks out to me. Do the Dolphins have to worry about a backup quarterback? Remember, for so long it was like Ryan Tannehill and Matt Moore making $5 million. Like, do the Dolphins have to worry if they draft a quarterback? Is it going to be a situation where they have to get someone who's not going to be a threat to Tua or anything like that? Or is it strictly at a point where it's finding the best guy? Because Josh, I'd love if the Raiders are cleaning house. if you could trade for someone like Aiden O'Connell, I think that could be pretty exciting in terms of backup quarterback.
I got you.
Maybe you draft someone in the second or third round, but I also wonder too, Josh, if you're drafting a quarterback in the second or third round, it's such a valuable position where you see guys get pushed up into that first round where sometimes they don't necessarily deserve it. If you're drafting a quarterback in the second or third round, you wonder if you're just drafting one there just because you can and not necessarily because you should, if that even makes sense.
No, it does, and I love how you had to make sure you explain the Aiden O'Connell thing because our listener will be, oh my God, you say it was good. No, man, he's a solid backup. We all know, I know what you meant, man. But I think it was Omar Kelly that mentioned, these guys don't have enough time to develop a rookie quarterback. So that got me thinking and made me realize that they're probably going to go that vet route. I think if you draft a guy in rounds 2 or 3, like you said, you're probably maybe just burning a pick at that point, right? Unless you have absolute confidence that he can come in and start when Tua goes down. I don't know who you can trust in this draft to do that. So hopefully they have their eye on someone. Maybe they even go for a trade. I joke that J.J. McCarthy, Stephen Ross, Michigan, they have to be some love affair there. Stephen Ross has to have a J.J. McCarthy fat head, but then you're investing a huge draft pick in another guy that's injured. So I don't know what the Dolphins are going to do. I am going to leave that up to Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel. But if you're Mike McDaniel, Jake, and you do feel like this, again, I said it earlier, it might be your last chance. You kind of got rebirthed in a way. You came to Miami knowing you had to, revitalize Tua Tagovailoa. You never got your chance to, draft a quarterback. You got Skylar Thompson, sure. And, back in the day, we had Brandon Davids, Ryan Tannehill. I don't know that the Dolphins will ever truly draft that quarterback that'll push their quarterback one. Like you mentioned, does it, ruffle some feathers? But I think that's kind of what they would need to do. And I'd be interested to see who Mike McDaniel would handpick because, again, you brought him in to be that guy that's the quarterback guru, the offensive mastermind, this, that, and the other thing. You basically let him, rebuild to a time alone. That's been that, right?
Something, Josh, it's taken forever. Chris Grier is finally officially worried about the offensive line. He kind of joked about it during the press conference where he said he was a little surprised it took the media so long to ask him about it because there was the clip last year. You guys are a little more worried about the offensive line than we are. Grier said, yes, this is the time again, like a few years back ago with Austin Jackson and Robert Hunt and Solomon Kinley and stuff. This is the time for us to do it again, start investing in some offensive linemen. Josh, this is another thing. Like, yeah, you spent 3 picks in the first 4 rounds on offensive linemen. Austin Jackson was a train wreck for 2+ years. Solomon Kinley, cheeks. How long did he last on the teams? Some poor soul has his jerseys because of us. How is this a good answer from Chris Grier? Like I remember Travis actually shared this part of the quote because I think a lot of the media was taking it. It's like, yeah, like 2020, this is another time where we're going to draft big on the offensive line. And Travis is like, yeah, there's some context here of like Austin Jackson, Solomon Kinley. I'm like, man, that's not good context. You drafted the 5th best, or the 5th lineman off the board that everyone knew was a little undersized, that he needed time to grow. All right, dude, here's your left tackle for your, rookie quarterback. Why are we saying that like we're celebrating? And I'm not mean like Travis's part. I was more joking with him, but I mean like Grier coming out here and saying like this is what we did. And another part that he brought up was the idea of like, our offensive line was really good last year. We were averaging 5 yards per carry. We were leading the league, and we decided to run it back with that same group, and we even got better by adding Aaron Brewer. We're just ignoring Robert Hunt just signed $100 million to play elsewhere. Arguably the one position that make you capable of running the ball up the middle once in a while. It's so weird that these are the ways you can kind of work around a billionaire owner. I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's wild. And I'll be honest, I'm sitting there listening to it. And I mean, I was kind of siding with Grier, or at least understanding where he came from with the whole, you're more worried about the offensive line because they did have some younger guys that I guess he saw some promise in with Butch Berry the year before and wanted to see him run it back. But dude, I mean, you can see the age of that offensive line, the age of this entire unit, just how, crazy, old they have gotten. And that's coming from a guy that's turning 38 very soon. So that's a real slap in the face for some of these players. But yeah, man, it's funny to hear him come out and say, basically we're going to completely, rebuild this thing and we're going to do it similar to how we did it back in, 2020? My dates all get mixed up. So do it, Chris Grier. Let's see what you can do. I mean, I'm not feeling very confident that he's going to be able to turn this thing around in 1 year based on, previous drafts. But, he does have Butch Berry next to him, Frank Smith, Mike McDaniel. We've all thought that Aaron Brewer wasn't. I thought Connor Williams losing him was going to be a huge mistake. And Aaron Brewer looked like a freaking monster. So trust in those guys, but I don't trust in those guys at all.
Let's go across the board real quick. Left tackle, opening day next year. Who you got? Mid-sip.
Mid-sip. Oh, man. Is Armstead coming back? Like, I pray that but do we – oh, man. Can I say Armstead? I'm just going to cop out and say Armstead because I don't have a rookie off the top of my head.
I think it's Patrick Paul just because I think there's a certain level of continuity that I think is so important for what the Miami Dolphins need to do. I think that Teron Armstead, he could come back, and if you could guarantee 60% of snaps at his all-pro level, I think that's a good thing. But I think for where the Miami Dolphins need to be, you need those guys to be available late in the season, and you need them to be hitting their stride late in the season. And when you have Teron Armstead, really falling off near the end of the year, like you need that stability. You need to be able to trust your guys and know how they operate, whether that's Patrick Paul playing 20%. Well, I don't want to say weak. What? Like if their Madden grade is 20% lower, I don't know, man. I think that's something you take, just knowing that continuity is there, especially like when you have Kendall Lamb giving it his all and he can't make it through the season on the other side. Like those are things you got to really be conscious about when you're rebuilding this unit. You can't rely on those older guys. You can't let it be Tyson Clabo be your answer.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, another thing they have to do is they got to figure out, where they can acclimate. Is that the word? Acclimate their resources, right? Which I don't know if that's the word. I'm gonna
cook.
Yeah, but either way, the most important thing is not really so much the starters for me. It's who those guys are backing them up. Because as we've seen every year now, right? It's who's coming in when we're late in the season and need someone to step up. So I don't know if I overlook Patrick Paul, but I have no issue with Patrick Paul starting the left tackle. Do you tell Teron Armstead just stay at home? Like, I mean, I feel like if he wants to come back, the Dolphins probably, and welcome with open arms or no. He did have some comments about Mike McDaniel in that locker room towards the end of the game against the Jets. So I don't know if he's going to hang it up, but I do.
What was the rough idea of those comments?
The rough idea was he basically said, it all starts with Mike McDaniel guys buying in early. He made it sound like there was some dysfunction. And when you see that, the offense and defense don't, mesh well together. So it just seemed like there was some, underlying issues that Teron Armstead, Calais Campbell, guys like that weren't able to fix.
Does that tone make it sound like if he was to come back next year, he'd even want to play with the Dolphins? Like, why waste your time? Like, if he wanted to come back and it was for what does that say about how he feels when he says something like that? And if he was still to say, all right, I want to come back and play for this team again, knowing this would be this same thing just happened for 3 years. Is it something like, I know I wouldn't be okay playing else? Like another team wouldn't give me the nod to play elsewhere. So I'm just going to come back here and get I'm not even trying to make this sound like he's trying to do something like a scheme or anything here, but I'm just trying to think out the thought process here of if he's this frustrated and if he still comes back, there's got to be something more happening here, right?
Yeah, maybe it's just he believes in everything, and maybe he saw what Tyreek Hill, I'm just throwing – I don't know who else was in that locker room that were issues, but Tyreek Hill, maybe that's what kind of sabotaged the season in a way.
River Craycraft.
He's a bad egg, man. That guy, I know he is. But yeah, and you wonder how much Teron Armstead want to not go to another team because, he's kind of stuck in that routine, right? We see the days off that he gets. We know the Dolphins, work with him, and, they know that on game day he's going to come out there and play at an elite level. What happens throughout the week to get there, they don't seem to care too much. So I think if he were to come back and he wants to still play here, again, those comments, I might have blew out of proportion. You can go check them out. There was no transcript on the website. So that says that to me made me wonder, okay, are they trying to cover this thing up? But there wasn't anything too crazy they said, but I think, if he comes back, it's going to say a lot about how he feels about the potential to, get this thing right in 2026, because he does not have many more years to go at all.
Left guard, Isaiah Wynn next year.
Yeah, that works for me. Unless they're bringing in a free agent or a rookie. I don't even know that I've taken the time to look at any of that stuff. Have you, Jake? I mean, I'm still stewing on, like you said, it hasn't even been a week and we're still just.
We're sitting and stewing.
I'm Eeyore.
Aaron Brewer, right guard, to be determined. Liam Eichenberg to the moon.
Yeah, unless I'm not bringing. What price tag would you bring him back for? I'm thinking if he signed. Okay, $1. I was thinking if he signed some, moderately small contract in the depth that he brings, but I just see Liam Eichenberg out there again, and I don't want to, man.
I'll get a little more reasonable. You can bring back either Isaiah Wynn or Liam Eichenberg. I think you can have one Liam Eichenberg level guy. Isaiah Wynn is better than Liam Eichenberg, but I I think you can enter the year with like one guy at a certain like level on your offensive line. Like you can have like one Jesse Davis in the mix and have it be like kind of okay. I think you can have like one Liam Eichenberg. Like it couldn't be Rob Jones. Like Josh, the Dolphins, they started signing some names, some future contract names, and for back-to-back years, Ryan Hayes, left tackle, Chasen Hines, like these are guys like you can only have one of these guys in the mix next year. That we got to start being serious people, I think.
That's the best way to put it. Chris Grier, start being serious about this offensive line, man. Enough's enough.
And then right tackle, Torres meniscus, but I think Austin Jackson will be back. I think he's a stout right tackle. It's just more of the process to get here was very unnecessary and long and very expensive.
Yeah, and I would like him when he has a Robert Hunt or, I don't want to say an elite guy next to him, but I want someone better next to Austin Jackson to help him out when he is out there.
If you could get one, actually, no, so right guard and left guard, you just need two new guards, really, if you have Patrick Paul being your left tackle.
Yeah. And then depth, because we need that depth, man. We need something. But you mentioned Ryan Hayes, Chasen Hines. I was finding some clips online, and Chasen Hines had some decent, someone had like 3 little clips of it. But, I'm no offensive line guy, so I was like, ooh, intrigued.
Something, I buried this news, Josh, and I appreciate you adding it here. Let's start with Reggie McKenzie is the favorite to become the Titans' next general manager per Diana Rossini of The Athletic. Miami would get 2 compensatory third-round picks if he is hired. Josh, that seems like a pretty sweet deal to me.
Yeah, it does. I mean, she says he's the favorite right now. So obviously they're doing their due diligence, but he had some time with the Raiders, built that team up, came here. He's had some say in what the Dolphins have done over these few years. So,
are you sure the Raiders built up? Might have been like sideways a little bit. Like,
see, did they win up? I don't even know. Good question. I know I had a friend who was a Raider. Somewhere on my computer, I have a cheeseburger. Reggie McKenzie on a walrus with a cheeseburger. He's just thinking about cheeseburger. He was a cheeseburger walrus. Maybe I'll just tweet that out on this podcast. But 2 third compensatory picks sounds awesome. And then Marvin Allen might move up into that spot. So, if you want him to Tennessee, come get him.
Yeah, I don't know enough, and I don't think any general fan knows enough to say, like, I will be up in arms if Reggie McKenzie. It's not like Anthony Weaver, where it's like the defensive coordinator, and you have all the coaches or the players talk about how they could relate to them. I could not tell you one Reggie McKenzie stamp that has been given up on one roster move this team has made. Josh, another move, the Miami Dolphins quarterback coach, Darrell Bevell, is interviewing in Cleveland for the offensive coordinator position. Josh, I think that's pretty interesting. I've really enjoyed having this offensive staff in Miami where you have a veteran like Frank Smith, you have a veteran former offensive coordinator like Darrell Bevell. I'm surprised he lasted this long, but I also think it's interesting that he would go somewhere like Cleveland where this is another scenario where he wouldn't necessarily be calling the plays with Kevin Stefanski there.
This is, again, where the Dory brain just doesn't process things properly. I didn't even think about that because that is something that he mentioned. He wanted to, potentially get head coaching interviews because he was an interim head coach in both Detroit and Jacksonville. But he also said, I want to continue to call plays. So good point, Jake. I don't know if that's necessarily where he goes, but he does have familiarity. And, that's kind of why the Dolphins brought him in with working with these young quarterbacks in Cleveland. I don't know what they're going to do at the quarterback position, but it's, Deshaun Watson ain't it, and neither is Dorian Thompson Robinson. So maybe he comes up there and he helps out there, but I'd much rather keep him around because as I continue to read, it sounded like the relationship that Tua Tagovailoa and Coach Bevell have is next level, and that's kind of why we see some of that goofy, more confident Tua, again, based on just the transcripts I ran through for an article in the Finsider.
I still think, Josh, of all the moves that can happen, I think a move at special teams coordinator isn't out of the realm of possibilities. I don't know if the Dolphins are going to keep Danny Crossman around. I actually appreciate that Mike McDaniel isn't someone who was kind of out there firing people the first day. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I'm still holding out all the hope, man. I think I hope the Dolphins get Anthony Weaver back. Robert Saleh, he just completed an interview to be the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers, who I think that would be the backup in Miami, but I could just see some scenario where Miami gets left open-handed there without a defensive coordinator. So I'm really hoping that the Bears, the Saints go in a different direction. Selfish, 100% selfish, because I think Anthony Weaver is one of those guys. It's interesting because we joke about it and we talk about how, like, as a Bears fan, how can you get bought in on Anthony Weaver? I don't think any fan could get bought in, but if you were like a GM or if you're the owner of a team and you've seen Anthony Weaver's career being an assistant head coach in Baltimore, what he did in Houston as a defensive coordinator, I think you can really buy in and understand why you'd want that type of person to be your head coach. When you have these scenarios that Mike McDaniel is dealing with, I can find people until they're blue in the face and they are still not showing up. Like, that's a whole nother issue. Anthony Weaver kind of comes off as someone who can handle those issues in a different way. So I understand why a lot of fans, and I appreciate them saying they jump off a cliff. So hopefully that will help us kind of hold on to Anthony Weaver. But man, this guy, he's lined up to be a head coach sooner rather than later.
Yeah, he's a stud. And you mentioned it kind of with Reggie McKenzie, but there are some things that, you know, as fans, you just don't understand. Like, you don't understand what Anthony Weaver's been doing in those rooms each day and the relationships he's built. I mean, you see him and embracing Calais Campbell at the end of the season. I mean, it kind of sums up everything it means to, or everything he means to this team and things like that. So, yeah, it's selfish, but I hope to see him back. One thing I did want to mention, and I don't have a list of special teams coaches that I'd love for the Dolphins to look at, but Darren Rizzi, right? That was a guy that used to be at the Dolphins, you know, one of the best special teams coaches in the leagues. Interim coach with the New Orleans Saints, you know, maybe he'll be looking for a new spot where he just wants to clamp on and, you know, go back to being a special teams coach for a year or two. I don't know if he'd really take that much of a, you know, promotion after getting that taste of being a head coach, but maybe he doesn't have a choice.
Weaver doesn't have the assistant head coach title in Miami. Maybe give that to Rizzi. I'd give that to Rizzi, have him come back. If you want to really develop a culture, like Miami had that culture, let's get it back.
John Embry has it. I did look that up yesterday, so I just want to make sure I mentioned that. So he is the one with the tag. And that's what I kept thinking with Anthony Weaver, because that would have been one of the most enticing things about, you know, if the Dolphins were to do that thing they'd like to do where they mid-season fire things, having Anthony Weaver take over and seeing what he can do would have been awesome. I just don't know. Do they have to use John Embry since he's listed as the assistant coach, or can they then?
I think they can do whatever they want. I'm fairly certain. I don't know for sure, but I think they can do whatever they want. Oh, man, I think Josh froze on me. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. We keep this podcast going year-round, so while the season came to an ugly, ugly end, we will continue to keep you up to date with all the news, all the notes about the Miami Dolphins, and hopefully a little bit of a funny way. But that is it. That is all we have for today's show. If you like what you listen to, please hit that subscribe button. If you have a moment and can leave a comment, leave a review, that stuff helps others find the show, and we always appreciate it. Lastly, you want to get a little video aspect of the show, enjoy the show with Josh and I on screen, 560 WQAM on YouTube. Finally, have a wonderful weekend, and most importantly,